of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Happy birthday. I had hoped that this would be broadcast. It's not going to be broadcast, but it will be uploaded, so members of the public will be able to view this. I did want to just open with some remarks on the coronavirus. I know there's a lot of information that's coming from a lot of different directions, and I know people are dealing with quite a bit. I just wanted to recognize that we have a very dedicated staff, and today and previous to that, we've had volunteers contacting us who are looking at trying to help out and so forth. I want to express my appreciation for this entire board showing up. We may not be meeting in this format for a little while. We're not sure yet. I do want to say that we'll be updating our website frequently and Facebook as well, and communicating through the e-alerts as frequently as allowed. I mean, our job pretty much is to be consistent with state and federal actions and to avoid duplications, but to try to keep our services as normal as possible. One thing that the state and the feds won't be doing is, or can't do really, is speaking very locally to our strength, which is community. And so I just wanted to remind everyone that community is very important. Social distancing should not be social disconnect. It's important to pick up the phone and check on a neighbor. Can I provide a meal if that's necessary, or anything of that nature. So do check on neighbors, share, and see who needs help while observing, good health practices. That's really the essence of what I wanted to talk about for a second or two. We do have the coronavirus and how the town will be reacting and acting on it later on in the agenda. So that's just some opening remarks, and we'll proceed with.
Stress why we canceled our executive session, please.
Sure, that's my first item on the agenda. So we did have an executive session, which was to discuss labor negotiation. This is a labor negotiation matter, but we hadn't quite entered into negotiations, so we would be talking in sort of general terms about the labor negotiations. We have been in contact with the union, and we both agreed not to meet in March. We'll probably exchange some information, and I want to just thank the union for their cooperation on that. So that's why I canceled the executive session. So just for the record, it was canceled at 5:30, and there wasn't going to be any action on that at any rate. So we'll move on to the select board minutes of February 18th, 2020, which are in the packet. And I'll be making some modifications to this kind of on the fly. Of course, always at the behest of my board here.
I'd make a motion that we approve the minutes of February 18th, 2020 as presented. Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve those minutes of February 18th, 2020. These are any discussion, corrections, or et cetera in regards to these. Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. We'll move on to warrants. We have 37 and 38, and 39 and 40, so I think we should take them two batches. 37 and 38 coming first.
I think something like that. I just have to make sure.
You
did? Yes. Oh, right.
So if the Wi-Fi is working again, everybody wants to log in. Same password as the prior.
Table.
Shall I?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So warrant 37 and 38 was the last one I signed. It is basically two separate ones. 37 are state fees, and there is 37A and B are state fees. 38 is a payroll. I want to start with a discussion of some of the items in warrant 37 that look large and could ask questions. If you look on what looks like to be page 1, it says warrant 37. We have Cushing Construction. That is, of course, a payment for the road contract. So that is the plowing and sanding. You can see nothing else really grabs the eye. The salt, of course, is for the salt on highways. And of course, the regional school unit payment was made $309,199.51. That pretty much wrapped up most of that total. So warrant 37 is in the total of $371,795.65. Would you like 38 as well?
Yeah, we'll add in that payroll warrant as well.
Gotcha. Excellent. The payroll for warrant 38 was $19,368.31. Therefore, I would move to approve warrants 37 and 38 for a total of $391,163.96.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve warrants 37 and 38 in the sum of $391,163.96. Is there any discussion?
Just one question. I'm assuming because the payroll, from my past experience, sounds like it's a little high, that's because of overtime during the winter months.
I'd have to look at it, but that would be my best guess, yeah.
Usually it runs about $16,000 a whack.
I think that that payroll may have also included some stipends as well. So I think that's, my recollection, right, that's what that was for. But
Stipends and overtime.
stipends and
But nothing
There are
else.
some stipends that are paid, not weekly, but, not on regular payroll cycles, but quarterly.
quarterly, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Was that Cushing's last thing?
I don't.
No.
No, we have at
Believe so.
least one. If not two more.
Yeah, I think we've gone until April before.
Yeah, we typically go through April.
His contract is through April, correct?
I'd have to double check that, yeah.
And we don't pay until it's over.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of 37 and 38 for pass. Dennis, if you'll move on to
39 and 40. I think Catherine signed this for me. I
Yes.
think, right? Because I might have been in Boston at the time. But at any rate, let's talk about, I had a sheet of everything. Let's talk about 39 and 40. That's right. 39. If you take a look, there are some things that stand out. Barry Talbot Royer, I believe, are our audit service. So that just is $2,500. It says it out there, but I just want to point out to everyone, we have yet to hear from them because a series of meeting sort of debacle, so we'll get to them soon. So that's that point. We have $75.99 to the Cobussy Watershed District. And that is the sort of overall payment that we make. Is that correct, Eric?
Support their operations and services.
Yes. And that is a part of that's what we do. Nothing out of the ordinary. David Ledoux is our assessor. You can see there just some eco-main. Then we get down into the sort of employee things. And I just want to point out that, yes, warrant 39 there for a total of, sorry, make sure I'm going to misspeak. All right, so warrant 39 and 40. So therefore, I would make a motion to approve warrant 39 and 40 for a total of $70,839.98.
I'll second that, and I have a question after Ralph's.
How did you know? I'm assuming that the audit payment is the final payment,
Yeah, it's the second half.
okay? And I was under the impression that the watershed payment was a one-time lump sum. I remember we did one several months ago, but now we have another. So what is it, a quarterly arrangement?
I'll have to look and see.
We've already given them a chunk.
I think that looks like half. I think
Yeah,
it's around
okay.
15 or
All right.
16, and that's
All right.
almost 8,
So we give them one at the end of the second quarter, and then a balance payment at the start of
Yeah, I'll double check, but I believe it is semi-annual, but I'll check with Teresa, make sure.
And my question was, the town of Winthrop, is that still for the Marana Cliff Dam?
That's for the ambulance service, ambulance service.
Oh, okay.
Portion of the ambulance service contract.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
Oh, down at the bottom, yeah.
That's
Are there
fine.
any other questions or discussion? Great, I have a motion on the floor, and it is to approve warrants 39 and 40 in the amount of $70,839.98. All in favor? Thank you. We'll move on to select board communications, and I'm just going to go ahead and go first. I'm using all my power. I want to just inform the public that the Tatar case was decided and the town prevailed. The actions and decisions taken by town officials were appropriate. The actions and decisions rendered by the planning board were appropriate. The select board's denial petition was appropriate. The appeal board's affirmation of town officials and planning board action was appropriate. There was no harassment or discrimination by the town. And I just personally want to add that I really regret the unfortunate situation to all parties. However, the town needed to defend itself, and not just in this instance, but in case similar possibilities arose in the future. And that's hopefully the end of this.
Here we go.
Other select board communications.
I have one, or maybe more, but just one for right now. So just to follow up on something you said about the audit, we have received the audit. The audit is concluded. It's just that the presentation to the select board has been postponed because of weather and now because of coronavirus.
Yeah, I mean, we can actually, that's, here and on this particular agenda, and my recommendation tonight, and we can do it under that piece of business, was just simply we're just discussing now and strike it, is if you have questions on the audit, you have the full audit. There's no compulsion for them to appear in front of us. It's a courtesy, it's a good courtesy, and it's a good practice. Maybe it's not good practice during coronavirus times. However, if you've read through the audit, or at least what is it, about the first 15 pages or so are really the most germane, and you have questions, specific questions, please give them to Eric in writing. In a week, we'll submit a series of questions, and they will reply with a written document. Is that correct?
It sounds good.
And then if there's any need to question something further, actually, we probably would not need to have them, because we would be questioning our own practices, and we would ask our treasurer or any staff that would clarify something for us, how we can handle that internally. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that's how we'll handle that.
So then my other question is concerning the solid waste and recycling committee. Eric, you had said that you would be putting something on the agenda for this select board meeting, or the select board.
Yes, I have under other business.
Okay, so you will get to that.
We will get.
Thank you.
Yes, yep.
I'd just like to commend Eric and of course his supporting staff for the great job he's been doing in handling everything concerning the coronavirus and closures, and it's a moving target and it's going to continue to be one. And I really appreciate your quick response to my several emails. I'm sure others have had them as well, and making multiple notices. Once again, I'll just say we're very lucky to have you here in our town.
You're here, I
Yeah.
agree.
You're
And I want to say, sometimes Catherine asks the questions that we're all thinking of, and so I'm very happy that she did that. It prevents me from asking a question or something else.
So you're not the only one always bothering me?
No, I just let you do that. Right?
Every minute.
Yes. Any other select board remarks? I'll make sure everybody has an opportunity.
I just, this virus issue and town response plans, obviously, we're a small town with limited resources, and we're gonna rely very heavily on outside providers for a number of things should we have serious experience. But I'm wondering whether or not, and it was briefly mentioned at the start of the meeting, we've already had folks stepping up to volunteer, to look in on people and provide service. And I'm wondering whether or not we ought to more formally orchestrate that in terms of a list of volunteers, and folks who have contacts with people who might not normally be in our chain of special needs folks, so that we could have a pool of folks that are willing to be out there to provide services where there's nothing until you get to the bridge of more serious incidents.
Yeah, my suggestion would be to actually take that up under the business that we
Okay.
have the coronavirus preparedness discussion, and it's just 5 minutes. And I suggest we do not spend just 5 minutes on it. And I think you should lead off that discussion with that. I think that's a really good point and one we want to make sure we hit upon.
5 minutes was last week.
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Then the president spoke and the governor and everybody else. So there it is. And I
And they've
think,
all spoken.
and I got rid of
multiple
the
times.
audit report, so we don't use all that time. Okay. Other select board.
Yes, the only thing I want to say is I'm going to tell you a story. My mother-in-law has a dependency on certain medicines, and so she needs to have them no matter what. She had a kidney transplant, and she is doing great. And I think about her a great deal during this time. I went to pick up some of her medicine for her, and the young man behind the counter at the pharmacy looked not only like he was completely in the weeds and overwhelmed, but also tried to put on the best face he could because he knew that was his job, and he was doing a great job at it. So when I went to the window after my turn came up, I just looked at him and told him what I needed, and on his way back, I just said, "You're doing a great job, and I appreciate it." And something like that might not have had an impact, but I just think it's important at this moment to remember that. So thank you.
I think we have to be kind.
Amen.
Absolutely.
So that's it. That's all. Appreciate it.
Chris,
Good.
you're good.
Just be kind.
Thank
And
you.
hopefully we'll have Heritage Days. We'll wait and see how this all plays out.
No, I think we're gonna be ready to have Heritage Day.
Eric, the floor is yours.
All right, I'll just give a brief update on activity at the transfer station. I'll let folks know that we are well underway. I will discuss this under other business, compactor, but well underway of moving on from the failure we had last Saturday. We have a couple of options that we'll discuss, but things are looking up, and I think that we'll be able to meet our need there without any further interference or impacts to the public. The backhoe that is at the transfer station currently is not the one that we're going to keep. It's wonderful. It's huge. It's a loaner because it's taken so long for that company to provide us with our actual piece of equipment. And we'll see, it is going to be another week for them. They have it on site in Maine now. They're filling the tires with the proper rubber leak-proof material, whatever it is, foam. That's going to be in next Thursday. But the one we have now, we did not pay for that. It's way more money than I ever want to spend on a piece of equipment. It's beautiful, but it's too big. So yeah, it's
I just have a question, real quick, and this was something that I just want to ask about. There was an example of on Saturday, the fact that we had a shutdown. Is there anything in an action plan or any type of like contingency that if there is a failure on one day, there can be a period of time that is a bonus kind of makeup? Meaning, I know if I loaded my truck up with all my trash, I'd probably just leave it in the back of the truck. I wouldn't want to unload it, knowing that the next morning there was what we might call a 4-hour sort of like makeup time or something like that. I understand the stress. I understand the taxing nature of that very thing. But the idea of sort of like a makeup time or a way to kind of gain that extra time would be something I would just be interested in. In the case, it's such a rarity that it has to close in the first place. And so thinking that if there was an ability to trigger some kind of makeup time the following day, assuming
have two
Okay,
things kind of in place for that, but it depends on if I'm just speaking from my solid waste tech
Go
here.
right ahead. I'm making notes here, yeah.
If the failure is such that the machine's still not operating the next day, then,
Oh,
then
absolutely.
that wouldn't be a possibility.
Right.
We've talked about possibly having an extra can on site.
Yes,
You do now.
yes.
now.
It just seemed like the Saturday
And
was
it-
perfect.
Then we wouldn't actually have to close anyway if there was a failure. We would
Right.
just be putting it in a different spot.
Yeah, we did have an extra can on Saturday, however, it was way down back in the mud and nobody could get to it.
Nobody could get to it,
Staff
yeah.
So things just did not work out, and, but I very much appreciate the comment about the make of time. I think that, that is something we can look at in the future.
Yeah.
And if the equipment's able to be repaired, and, to move ahead.
Thank you, just an idea.
Yeah, no, it's a good suggestion.
Problem is that most of these things happen on the weekend,
We have
when
people,
providers of maintenance service and roll-offs are simply not available.
Yeah, and that does make it more challenging. We did try many avenues to get that resolved, but I think the best avenue right now is new equipment, so we'll get to that.
And I'll just give you guys an update. The town of Winthrop ambulance service of 13,000 is half. That was the second half.
Great.
And the Cobussy watershed is a quarter. So that was the third assessment for $7,600.
Okay, thank you for looking at that.
Did you complete your report or did we?
We tangentialized.
That's really all I had for
Okay, great.
coronavirus is really the rest of it, so
We'll wait for that.
we'll wait for that, yeah.
We'll move on then, and I want to thank the following boards, commissions, and departments. The Conservation Commission minutes for January 14th, 2020. I'm not seeing any more 2019 in here. The Cemetery Committee minutes of January 16th, 2020, and the Trails Committee minutes for January 28th, 2020. And the Library Board minutes of February 10th, 2020. Thank you all. Members of the public may address the select board. Do you have anything you would like to address? And there's no microphone, so you can just speak.
That's
Speak
it.
towards the laptop.
Yeah, that's it.
Is the ordinance for the marijuana establishment, is that on the packet on the website now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, because it wasn't at 4 o'clock, last time I checked.
It was, the agenda and packet were actually linked separately. So if you clicked on the agenda, it looked like it would be agenda and packet, but if you clicked on the agenda, it would be the agenda. If you clicked on the packet, it was the packet. But Kristen did mention that to me, and I did link them after, but it was up there. It was just, it was two separate items on the same line.
Different than normal.
Different than normal. Yes, a lot of things different than normal.
Anything else?
I don't think we had the actual. So it was part of the agenda and packet. set?
Yeah. you were-
Yes, the first reading.
Yeah, whole.
Okay, let's move on to appointments, reappointments, and resignations. We want to consider the appointment of Eric Dyer as the E911 addressing officer. This is kind of a pro forma, actually, and I'm not sure we've been doing that.
We have not, and I do have a point after you're done.
Make your point, that's probably what I need from you.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so, this is something we should be doing annually. It is in order to maintain an accurate record of our addressing with the state of Maine so that emergency response services can have a certain place to respond to that's consistent with our ordinance. We have the E911 ordinance. Normally this would be delivered, this appointment would be delivered to the code enforcement officer. However, I received notice last week that our code officer is going to be finishing with the town. And so he's going to give us 2 weeks of regular schedule, and then we'll be moving to 1 day a week until we find a replacement. We've already started working with the town of Wayne on that. Not a great time for that transition, but one we will deal with.
This is Travis.
This is Travis, yeah. I'm very sad to see him go, but he got a job 3 miles from his house instead of an hour and 20 minutes. So I can't fault him, but
Wow.
certainly a hard thing for us to deal with. So
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move the appointment of Eric Dyer as the E911 addressing officer.
Second.
And moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that?
Just one question. It's an annual appointment.
Yep.
So we don't perhaps overlook it down the road. Is it by statute that it has to be annually, or could we make it concurrent with the service of town manager?
We would make it concurrent, I think, with the service of we probably name the code enforcement officer once we're stabilized.
So it's
But
better.
it would be probably, we do that like the first meeting in July.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's
Or
one of
last
the ones we
meeting in
do.
June. We do a large amount of.
And I've already I've coordinated with the clerk on ensuring that this part of that process, the ordinance dictates that we make the appointment. Both are ambiguous about the term. And so we, just like the other appointments, annual makes the most sense. So we've already fed it into the system in that way.
So to clarify my appointment then, it's through the end of this fiscal year.
You still second that?
Yes. No.
He's never changed the second one. And all in favor? So we have two appointments for Mr. Thomas Maloki for the Cobussy Watershed District and Kevin Kelleher to the Recreation Board. They're both new. I asked Eric to tell them that we would wait. They need to be here this evening, and then we can go ahead and consider them. It's a policy that we see them usually in the first one. So with your indulgence, we'll waive that policy and go ahead and proceed in those two.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Thomas Maloki to the Cobussy Watershed District for a term that ends in 2022 on what date? 6/30/2022. And Tom has served in various capacities on committees in the town. So.
Yes.
And you want to do them separate or together?
No, do them together.
I'd also like to appoint Kevin Kelleher to the Recreation Committee for a term ending on 6/30/20 this year. To the record.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to appoint the individuals as noted previously to the boards and commissions as noted previously. Is there any discussion on those nominations?
Just one question. The Recreation Commission probably still has a shortage of one member, given the fact that we had a dual resignation in our last meeting.
Correct.
All right, so we still have at least one vacancy we have to fill.
At least one, yeah. I believe it is just one because they have a very tight group and they do a great job of self-recruiting. Yeah, we still have a vacancy.
Okay, all in favor of those? Thank you. We'll move on now to
Yes,
as far as the audit report, we already spoke to that. If you have a question on the audit or something you would like clarified, please send by email that question or note to Eric. And let's say we will do that within this week. And then you would, by Friday, and then you would forward that. And maybe when you forward that, you would just copy us all so we see what the questions that Kathleen.
absolutely.
Kathleen,
Well,
I do have a question.
you're waiting a long time for Kathleen's.
Okay, that's really the discussion on that. Was there anything to add to that?
Do we need to formally accept the audit?
I don't think we do.
Okay.
But I would just like to thank them for getting it in on the time basis that they did.
Yes.
And it looks to be very professional. I have not read the whole thing. I was expecting presentations. Now I will read the whole thing, but nicely done.
Yes.
It's a new thing for the town of Reedfield.
Yeah, and there's some other work that goes on with the audit too that does engage other individuals in the town besides the staff. For example, I'm asked as the board chair a series of questions that I respond to. So I thought it was a very professional job overall, and I perused it at the 40,000 foot level, but I'm going a little deeper now too. We'll move on to considering the status of the land surrounding the Jesse Lee Church. So it's basically an update on that. Eric, would you give us that update?
Very brief update. The original TAC looking at a quiet title as a means to transfer that property is, in the opinion of the legal counsel representing, but assisting the church with this discussion and process, has recommended against that, in part because of the cost and the burden of trying to notify the heirs of the original grantor. There's a lot of stuff around that, but long story short is the church does not believe that's the right tack. I don't believe, just from the information provided to me, that that's the right tack. I also don't believe that this is something that we can resolve at the June town meeting, given the time restraints that we have and the other issues that we're pursuing at the moment. My suggestion to the board and to the church would be that we work together over the next 6 or 8 months to develop a plan for how best to present this at a future town meeting if there is a continued desire to work towards transferring that property from ownership of the town of Reedfield to the church. It would be, could be a gift, could be some other kind of transaction, there could be terms. Yeah, as it stands, it's a little bit gray, but the ownership certainly does appear to be within the town's, within the town at the moment, without a real clear means of transfer other than a sale or a gift of some kind.
And everybody's working collaboratively together on the same page.
Yes. Yeah.
And the church has no issue with this term.
No, they brought it to my attention, and we discussed briefly the option of looking at something for a transfer at the June meeting, but that doesn't seem realistic. So they're fine with that.
So we could do, what I think I'm hearing you say is that we could do a sale or a gift, a nominal sale or a gift. And that would not involve having to notify all the heirs because it would be an actual transaction.
From one entity to the next, yes.
As opposed to a changing of the deed without a transaction.
Yeah, it's a quite title. It's not my pay grade, but yeah.
Yeah, there's still many considerations, I think, that need to be undertaken.
And it would be voted on.
It would have to be,
Yeah.
any sale of town property does need to be, I think, at least of that magnitude, voted on by the town, so.
And we probably ought to mark out where that property is so that it's clear now that it's been brought to our attention.
That's part of the issue is that we do have a 4 or 5 acre lot, depending on whether you look at the tax map of the deed, with an amorphous 1/4 acre floating around in the middle that belongs to the church. So a survey is certainly in order, at least to find the outward boundaries. There are a few different things that need to happen, yeah.
And that would be our survey because it would be of our land that we're interested in.
Yes, although I think we could probably work it into some kind of transfer.
No reason why we couldn't share the cost.
Yeah, or something like that, but at the very least, we would want to do it ourselves and then talk about how to manage the costs later.
So our original intent, as discussed when Les was here, remains the same. It's just we need a different vehicle to get us there.
Yes, and as I said, the board, I think, does have the ability to dispose of surplus property, but something like this, I think, certainly deserves a town meeting vote, but that's really more of a totally question. Board.
Okay, we'll move on to the coronavirus preparedness discussion. I want to thank Eric for a pretty thorough. It's a memo, a 2-page memo. You probably received it, and it basically goes through how we would be able to staffing, closures, meetings, and basically, the thing I would say is, if there isn't a legal basis for a board or commission meeting, I would avoid holding that meeting and recommend not holding it for the time being. The select board, we may have some enabling legislation or actually action in the legislature, which would allow us to meet remotely or a mix of remote and direct. And we'll figure that out. And the only other thing I would probably mention that would well, I guess I won't go into that at this point. Those are the main considerations, I think, in terms of the governance of the town. Thoughts? You started off with one rel. We received a couple of emails, I think today, are on volunteerism. And I think we can become a clearinghouse, if you will, for that. Whether we want to, dedicate staff time to it or see how we can coordinate it through a couple of different individuals. I think the age-friendly committee was talking about stepping up on some of that, and they've been really good at that, and they actually may be able to identify some of the concerns that there would be. I will say that as a town, we've kind of been through a little bit of this in spurts and spats over the years with, the ice storm, which is quite a ways back, but also a few other items that have happened in the interim, if you will. So I think we're pretty good at checking on neighbors and so on and so forth. I do just want to remind people about that. And I do want to make sure that we're a clearinghouse for, for anyone that just says they need help, or anyone that wants to offer help, in the sense that if you don't know where to start, at least maybe we can help you get started. I think that's the thing. So it could be somebody calls us and we point them to the right resource. We'll try to have the right resource and links on our web page and Facebook page. We've already started with that.
The only problem we have is the elderly don't use the internet.
Absolutely.
And we have to reach them.
That's why we want to make sure that some of this is simply neighbor to neighbor. And we do need to take personal responsibility to do that, but we also want to encourage it. And I think there's a way to systematize that a little bit. I think we're going to do a conference call. Is that what we thought we would do?
Yeah,
with age friendly and
a couple
other volunteers.
The league has a pretty good handle on who needs.
Lee does, and we do as
There's
well
a
with
list.
the emergency
Yeah.
operations
Yeah.
plan. And actually, I talked to Kristen this morning about updating that. It was last updated in November of 2019, so
Okay.
it's a
It's
very
pretty
good thing.
current, then.
Very good thing that we continue to do that.
Yeah.
Regular review.
Yeah, and this kind of security is, it's a little different in the sense that what we're reaching out is to make sure that people basically feel comfortable. There's not somebody that needs to see a doctor, or there's somebody that has a food security issue or anything like that. We don't want people to get socially isolated. However, this isn't the powers going out, trees down all over the place.
Right.
That kind of thing. So it's, doesn't mean this storm couldn't come through. Probably shouldn't have said anything, right? Bruce Burgoyne said. So it's a little different.
Yes. And the Facebook page will be updated as soon as Eric sends something out. I usually get it, and at this point, it's very easy for me to blast it right on there. My hope is to go, I have myself to visit the transfer station tomorrow, and I want to just kind of get sort of a sense of how everything is, and sort of report out on Facebook so people know what that situation is like. I also want to mention that RSU 38 is doing a drive-through meal service. It's breakfast and lunch. It's free for students and children. It begins on Wednesday. It's the 18th through the 27th, and you have to go to Mount Vernon Elementary School. It goes from 7 to 9 a.m. daily, Monday through Friday. That's March 18th through March 27th. 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. It's open to all students in RSU 38 Fayette. Breakfast and lunch will be included in a single box or bag, and meals should be consumed off-site. That information is also on the Facebook page. It's underneath the different sort of things that people are doing on the website, just so people know and we can get that information.
Yeah, and we also want to, if we do have essential boards that meet, we want to let people know that if they have an underlying medical concern or just a concern about their own exposure, first, if we do transition to being able to talk electronically, And what they're gonna do is basically, there's some freedom of information rules around that need to get temporarily waived. And so the legislature will probably do that, and they'll probably just set up for the duration or something like that. I don't think they're gonna permanently change any law. That, obviously we don't want people, exposing themselves or exposing others, if they, or even if they have just a discomfort with that. For example, I called every member of this board before this meeting tonight, to make sure that they knew that, we try to have a forum, but you guys are loyal. Thank you so much.
Comes with the territory.
Come on, man.
It does come with the territory. We are the elected representatives of the town. However, if this deepens, we obviously will take our own actions to act accordingly, and it sounds like the state is making some good provisions. I found the governor's, both of her news conferences, very informative, and the medical people that were with her were just really on the level, and I really appreciated the information that was going out.
One thing I would suggest, where my mother's 93 and doesn't get out,
Yep.
Sometimes they just need groceries.
Yeah.
I mean, I do all her grocery shopping, so there's somebody there that doesn't have family to grocery shop. Does that mean?
Yeah, every week when I grocery shop, I have 2 orders.
Yeah.
And,
And because of
Yep.
the situation, I use the Hannaford to go.
Yeah.
And even that is difficult now because you have to call, you have to get your time 2 days in advance.
Mhm.
And when you pick it up, you might not have everything because they don't have
Or you won't have it really.
it.
They're not even close to having everything.
But they will.
They will.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's coming back.
December 25th is coming.
I have a comment that's on a totally different scope, but we never signed the latest version of the plan, and I think it's important, since we may be utilizing it, that we actually sign that, so. Well, the copy, I don't remember signing it, and the copy that's online is not signed.
Would you check that, Eric?
Yeah, I will.
And I also was just on the website, and there are multiple versions of the EOP there, and I think we really ought to have just one, because the first one I opened was from 2014.
Okay, yeah.
And we can probably, that
The old
iteration
stuff
has
needs
been
to go away.
replaced, so we don't really need it there. Maybe if you want to have
Archive folder.
an archive folder, but when I searched EOP, it came up with multiple.
Well, actually, yeah, when you search, you're going to pull anywhere that exists, but we probably ought to make sure our pointers,
First point should be the current.
Yeah, well, with the ordinance, I think it makes the most sense just to have the current version on the website. We can have archival stuff here at the office, but otherwise it's just confusing. So, we'll make sure that gets pulled off the website.
There's not really a whole lot we can do as a town, because this isn't a disaster happening in our town. This is a disaster happening in our society at large. And we don't have any medical facilities here. I guess I would ask that, maybe to ask Eric if he could be in touch with both of our schools, with the Marana Cook School District and with Kents Hill School. Just so that the town is aware of what they are doing. I know, have you been in touch with Kents Hill at all?
Not since about a week ago.
Are
Are
they
they
even
on
still there, or did they
Well,
send
yes,
them home like
they had,
everyone else?
no, they had
They're
spring
on-
break, and they said that everybody needed to stay on campus. If you left campus, you probably would not be coming back, whether you were staff or student. Because that would affect the campus. They have a large number of foreign students and students from away inside of our country. And European and Asian students couldn't go home because there's no travel there. So they were staying, so staff has stayed and they are on break, but they're all still there. And so I think they have a great plan in place. But I think it's important because it's a fairly large group of people in one place in our town. We need to be aware, and the same thing with the school. I noticed that on Channel 6, I don't think it still says that RSU 38 is closed.
It does,
It does now?
yeah, for 2 weeks.
Okay, because it didn't at first, and I think that if we can just remind the school, and I didn't want to send an email that was snarky, so if I have Eric do it, then it won't come from me. But I think it's important because there are a lot of people in our town who want to know, is the school open? Who don't have school-age children, so they weren't notified over the weekend. And people are just curious, and I think anything we can do to give more information, it sets people at ease. And then my last question is, we do still have a health officer, is that correct?
We do,
Have we appointed one?
I think the last time he was appointed was Dr. Fagan. I think it was just an ongoing appointment. I'm not sure that has been.
It was an annual, it's just an annual.
Is it annual as well?
I think
Okay,
it
all
is.
right, I'll check on that. It's not an active position, so he hasn't been involved in any of those ones.
But I think we ought to
sessions, but-
actually, as we did with the E911 officer,
Yeah.
we should appoint that every year. I know it used to be stipended at some point in time.
It still is, he just doesn't accept it because it's unanimous.
And it's like $200
Yeah.
anyway, but I think it would be important, it's having that other piece in place.
If you just graduated from med school with loans, there's $200 in refill
Right
money
there.
for you.
And you probably don't have to do a
yeah.
thing for it.
I think
I could provide some lodging as well, and you'd have a candidate in a heartbeat.
I think a couple of other things of note for residents is, there may be some questions about what we're doing with public hearings, with elections are a long ways off.
Yeah.
However, again, the state is in session tomorrow to finalize things, and they will be addressing that. Our intent is to have public input into the budget. We may have a dialing for dollars night, or something like that, who knows?
It's a week from this Thursday.
It is, and we may postpone that one. We'll have to look at our schedule and what kinds of flexibility we have in it. But that one we may postpone, say, 7 days.
Or change the format.
Or change
I think
the
it's
format.
probably more likely at this point, but.
But we'll be addressing those as we go
Don't
on.
we have some date deadlines?
We do.
We have
do.
several.
Some of those
Isn't there a
may,
printing
some
one
of
the
those
day
may,
after?
some of those may have to soften. And some of them may have to get rushed on our part.
Okay.
We'll adhere as close as we can to what our requirements are. And
Isn't 3/25 the deadline for legal review of all proposed warrants?
I think it is.
Yeah, we're running right along to it. But my hope and expectation is that we would maintain the schedule as much as possible. This is exactly right, Bruce. We'll meet it if we can. If not, we'll try not to budget too badly. And we'll certainly stay within state law.
Yep, and then the thing is, state law may give us a little bit more flexibility on the emergency basis. And that's only really if we're gonna make changes, only in consideration of attendees and board members who would be required to be there. So, the intent is for the budget to go forward on schedule. However, we may modify how some things are presented and so forth. That's what that's all about.
Chris, did you say the 25th or 7th?
25th is the deadline for legal review of the warrant.
So what was, because we're not meeting till the 6th, and I thought we had done it for.
We have
the
the
day
warrant
ahead.
in this packet.
Yeah, so the legal review is really for the town attorney to make sure that all of our warrant articles and ordinance changes are copacetic.
We still see it after that.
Yes.
So we can
So-
still change it after
Still
that.
change the expectations that you would, especially if you find an issue.
Okay, and so what is our deadline for that? Is that listed in there, Chris?
Well, the deadline
Final
for
word is April 3rd, maybe. I haven't used
6
it.
days before voting, nominating a warrant due to clerk on 4/10.
April 10th, yeah, so then the week before, we have 2 meetings, one for the select board and one for the budget.
3:30
committee.
for the select board and final warrant.
Yep.
And 4/2 for the budget committee.
Exactly, there
Okay,
you go.
so we really do need to have a phone-in meeting or have it.
We will have a meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, the intent all along is that everything gets the regular blessings and review that it should. It's just some of it may be done a little bit differently.
So are we on a particular attendance requirement? I know that the president and the governor are now down to 50
10.
or 10.
10.
So
It's
it's
10 now.
It's 10 now,
Yeah, I
okay.
mean, I've taken the approach from the beginning that it's, basically, unless you have to meet and it's essential to meet, that we don't meet, just because the risk is there. And, we have a very limited pool of staff and a very limited pool of officials to work with. So the more we can do to limit exposure to transfer station, particularly, we basically, tomorrow we will have a zero touch. And there will be very limited interaction between the attendants and staff, attendants and the public. We've taken pretty serious steps. People will be putting the cash into the bucket, not in anybody's hands. We're doing everything we can to very much separate people physically, including staff. I told our two maintenance people, I said, you guys are in trial separation, pre-divorce. You have to take separate vehicles, but you still work together. So we're trying to do things like that, and we did have discussions with staff about that space, and we're trying to prioritize if staff need to go home because of risks themselves with their families. Because eventually people probably will get infected, and the whole idea is to try to spread that out, and we want to keep people that are potentially at risk of serious consequences healthy for as long as possible. So we will be making some changes in how we already have, and how we run the town office and how we run most operations. I do want to say very quickly that my first bullet point is the one I think that is most important. We have a planned medical change.
Yeah.
Services are currently provided in many areas. The library is closed. The town office may be closed later this week, may be closed in 3 weeks. There may be some staff working from home. There may be some physically in the office. But as everybody knows, it's a fluid situation, and we're responding with an eye towards safety, public and employees, being the top priority. So services may be changed or diminished, and
Some of them
just keep going.
Yeah, and some of them maybe, we may feel it's essential that, some people have some access to reading materials and so forth. So we may set up a temporary one-time delivery service and not expect to post back for a couple months, or something like that. So, we're that's part of the volunteer discussion that we're going to have.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I wouldn't want this to become overly burdensome on a small town administration, but we do need some sort of clearinghouse function. And I'm not sure that the age-friendly committee group is the one that compiles it and administers it. It might be the one that responds to requests from that database, but we need a central location, I would think, to who are the folks that are in need, who are the folks who are willing to volunteer, and then have that here at the town hall, updated periodically as people come and go for whatever reason, and then perhaps age-friendly is the administrative group that utilizes that database and then calls the resources, puts them in contact with the people that need the help.
I think it's somewhat our intent anyhow.
It is.
We would want to know that because we're the phone number.
And sooner or later,
they're
the
gonna
state's
call.
gonna want data as well. So if you don't have it in a collective, centralized place, you're gonna be scrambling.
Yeah,
I
we'll
think
be doing all those things, yeah.
I think the age-friendly committee, and I'm not being rude here, but I think most of those people are in the age zone of probably cannot be volunteering, as many of our people in town may be. So it's
I
not
would
just-
volunteer in a heartbeat, and I'm in that zone, and it doesn't bother me.
But part of the plan, and this is what I think we as citizens of our country have to be careful with, is that if we're being asked for select groups to stay in, we need to do that as much as possible. And we need to not be the ones going out and helping people if we're the most vulnerable to this disease. So I just think we have to be really careful in who we ask or assign duties to.
I don't, given our pool of prospective volunteers, I've got a feeling when the phone rings, if you're gonna use that criteria, there's gonna be anybody who answers.
But possibly, but I think that our obligation is, as you said, to make a clearinghouse type of situation available, so that people can, because times change, volunteer pools change.
Sure.
You know,
It's gonna be in flux for the next.
yeah, absolutely. I will say that staff resources, I mean, we've already seen the library close because of a half-time staff person that needs something to do. I'm already working with Melissa Small, who's a librarian, to help facilitate and coordinate this information transfer, work with the other organizations, the age-friendly, municipal staff will be filling in that role, as well as other work dries up, we're going to redirect. And especially if the front counter gets shut down, which is a real possibility. Many of the towns have already closed their offices entirely to the public. We're trying to go for a softer landing. We're going to transition their roles, and we're going to continue to do everything we can to support as much interaction, communication, really communication is our primary role, but facilitating volunteers and all that is part of it. So yeah, we, very good points, Ralph, and Catherine as well. That if we want to make sure we're careful of who's volunteering and who's in what role, because if you get sick, you're taking a bed for somebody else.
When you didn't need to.
You didn't need to.
Right.
Today's guidelines that came out again from the CDC are that they want everyone to work from home unless it's necessary to be at work. So I guess I would suggest that maybe we reassess keeping the town office open now. If Teresa and you can work from your respective homes and answer the phone remotely, I would rather see that than have you at risk and people who are coming in at risk, because what the government's trying to do is to keep us all away so that we don't spread. And if we don't spread, we can get healthier sooner.
Right, in terms of volunteers too, I mean, the fact that there will be many more people in town rather than getting out of town may actually enrich our volunteer pool. And we can actually make that appeal, that if you're at home and have some flexibility, that you could, you know, if you're 40 years old, you don't mind making a run to the pharmacy for somebody, and you know, that would be a really nice need that you could fill. So we may be prompting some things, but as Eric pointed out, we've got a plan in place. It is drawn up very rapidly, and it's not 100% thorough, because conditions are evolving hourly.
Yes.
Well, look at us, Friday, we had one case.
Yes.
Yeah, we're 19.
So-
Before that, we had no case.
I think it's nice, I would like us to give Eric support officially, maybe not through a motion, but at least through a recommendation, that he has it. Okay, so let's make a motion.
No, it's not.
But anyway, I just think, I would like Eric to have the flexibility to shut the town office down to whatever degree he feels is appropriate based on the guidance from our federal and state government.
And I think he feels already he has that authority.
Yeah,
And I think I was even mentioned in here that we may at some point close, reduce hours. We've certainly recommended how we can do a lot of this business online. So I think that complete authority lies there, and you do recognize it. The other thing is, I spoke with Eric personally. Work is employer, us, the board.
Right.
I also think it's important that we don't bomb him from 5 different directions. So I would ask you if you have thoughts or ideas to put them through me, so I can talk with Eric about them. That doesn't mean you don't talk to Eric, okay? That's not my intent whatsoever. But I just don't want 5 different people coming at him with this and that, this and that.
But we could all
So
find some.
particularly on logistical items, you know, that it's just kind of we're probably going to be in contact every other day or daily or whatever in the meantime. So.
And in terms of the Facebook page, I mean, you know, like, it's always sort of, I always just follow kind of what's going on and already sent out, and generally try to do that. I think you've been really good about forwarding me things that if you need to include, like, hey, this is it. I try to avoid, for that very reason, sort of speaking on behalf of the select board. I don't think that's appropriate. So what you know, anything like that, if you Bruce have an official thing that you want to send out, if you want me to share something like that on there, please let me know, and I can do that.
And that doesn't mean you don't, right, we're not
No, of
shutting
course.
down communication.
Of course, no.
If
It's
you're
just-
working with Eric on a
fluid.
particular item, you got a phone call to make or whatever.
Yeah.
But I just think for the virus thing, as we go through that in particular, let's just try to be coordinated about that. And also that goes two ways, if Mr. Burgoyne isn't being quick enough and getting that information through, you should give them an elbow.
Just sharing an experience I had today at school. They brought us into work. Way too many people in the building. We tried to have a meeting of 50 people. That didn't work. It ended up being more. We were socially distanced. That was fine. But we were asked to do something that really felt like we were being asked to spin our wheels. And it was just coming to work to be at work. And I feel strongly that that is the wrong approach for any business or organization to take. I think it's better to close down, take some time, figure it out, implement something that's meaningful, that has good thought behind it, and knowing that it's going to change instead of involving everyone in the middle of all the changes. I just want to give you as much authority as we can to do what we believe is correct.
I think it's all understood and it's there.
Perfect.
And as a matter of fact, we can alter the hours and still have people come in if they feel their resources are here and so on and so forth. So my daughter's in a situation where she's a supervisor and, you know, there's a number of people in a very open office about this size, but it's all cubby holes and all that stuff. And so they've closed down, but if an individual needs to come in and print stuff or, you know, use some resources in the office, that's understood to be
Fine.
reasonable and fine, or just for privacy or whatever.
Or someone could work at night while someone else works in the afternoon, if that's what they choose. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, we discussed, you know, those options and others on how to make all of this come together. The goal, obviously, is to maintain continuity of services, and Catherine, how about you know stuff with the solid waste committee? But I want to make sure that if we can meet remotely, that we do it, that as many things happen as we're expected to and planned as possible, they just can happen differently. And so,
We'll probably have way better attendance remotely.
I think we may.
Well, and you know, I mean, this year maybe, again, the modifications that we make, we may not even know what they are at this point. We may say there are certain materials that we are not going to take to the transfer station for 30 days just to reduce volume and contact time, and realize that we're going to have to open an extra day, for example, just for those materials in 30 days. So, I mean, that's, you know, a possibility.
Absolutely.
That you
Yeah.
store at home. We're not going to use store at home trash, I don't think, but, you know, we may do some things like that. There's a lot of creative angles that we can do.
Yeah. But one last thing I'll say is that, you know, right now we are in this area where I'm taking some leadership on a few different issues, but there may come a point where we do have to engage in the emergency operations plan. Things change, that would change dynamics and roles, but we're gonna have to be a little bit creative even with that, because the EOP foresees us in this room, talking and working together and
We're talking about cots and
passing
shelters
notes and all this
and
stuff.
stuff.
And it's the same.
Yeah, this is great. So you're right, the plan doesn't actually kind of cover,
This.
it covers technically some of those steps,
Yeah.
but the
Not,
exercises are not.
not having to
They're
distance.
really about a bunch of trees down
It's about a half.
and a bunch of people in pork pots and stuff, you know?
Yeah, it has to be relevant, but we're gonna be creative with that as well, but, yeah, I'm glad we're all working together on the same page.
Do we have a backup plan for you?
Bruce, I call somebody, yeah, I call Bruce. I mean, we do have, Teresa's the, you know, assistant, town manager, I guess, in some respects, certainly an appointment could be made, for another staff member, by the select board to, anybody else. You know, I hope we don't get to that point. I'm working very hard to be healthy, and I'm washing my hands probably too much, but,
Fingerprints left.
it's really up to the board, to move on to that, but I would say that we have multiple staff that are capable, of communicating, effectively, and that's the whole the whole, but a large portion of my job is to communicate. So,
And it would be temporary.
yeah.
Other thoughts? No, I just wanted to sort of find out where we were on the agenda.
We are still with that item that I knew was not going to be a 5-minute item.
Yes, indeed.
I anticipated that. It's really, it's funny because when Chris and I met with Eric to do, were you with that? Were you at that thing?
It was
We just said,
Tuesday.
well, we're gonna need 5 minutes to at least tell folks, we got to
Yeah,
send what's
it was-
planned
it was-
on the fly.
Tuesday,
I
yeah.
just-
That was a week ago.
Yeah.
No worries.
I'll take that, so then.
Sometimes that.
Okay, have we done everything we want to do in regards to that? It's a moving target.
And then
I just wanted to sort of check.
No, I'm glad you did.
You don't want to be here all night.
I do not,
No,
I do not. Not that I don't love all of you. but I am.
We have a full draft of the FY '21 budget and warrant. We've got 20, 30 minutes for that. I don't know if we're gonna need all of that. Not a lot has changed numerically in that budget. I can't say I read every single warrant article, because some of them are so repetitive in previous years. I kind of concentrated on the last third of it, because that's where you make a lot of, we're adding, so forth, language on ordinances and so forth.
That's how I missed Article 11, because I was doing the same thing.
Okay, tell me about that.
Article 11 is the beach, and
Oh, yes.
I am thrilled with whoever the author or authors of that article are. I think it is perfect. I read it to my family, Dennis, and they were like, go.
I'll read it for the record. Shall the town of Reedfield vote to make use of the Reedfield Town Beach free to Reedfield residents beginning January 1, 2021, with supporting revenue to come from property taxes, program fees, rentals, and other sources as deemed in the best interest of the town. So that's that one. I do have a question on warrant. Is this exactly the format we've used in the past when it comes to changing our warrants? So here's my question in particular.
Yeah.
So Article 39, shall the warrants entitled 2020 amendments to the town of Reedfield administrative ordinance be enacted? Wouldn't the wording be, shall amendments to the administrative ordinance be enacted?
This is the language that we got from legal counsel last year, the year before. So it's awkward. I don't like it.
I don't like it.
I don't know how better to do it. We could, I think.
Can we just to cut to the chase on it, can we on Articles 39 and 40, which are the two amended ones, right?
Yes.
Just flagging for legal counsel, can you help us find a better way to word that that's within the parameters allowed?
Because they're amendments.
Because they're amendments.
Yeah.
It just seems to me there's a clearer way to ask it. It sounds like you're adopting a new ordinance, which you're not.
Yeah.
Because that's not really the title of the ordinance.
It actually would be, and we would modify the title to actually say that. And we did that last year with the land use ordinance. The rationale was that you're not necessarily adopting the rest of the ordinance, you're adopting the ordinance changes that are then adopted by reference or something to that effect. I don't like it, but
It's
we
legalese.
will work on finding a better way to do that if possible.
Yeah, okay. It's just a quick flag on those,
Yeah.
not asking for anything else.
When we get to those, I do want to make a few comments on the changes, but I will say with this draft overall, this is the most and best I've been prepared, the budget committee, the select board, for this discussion at this point in time. I'm very confident in how this was put together. The numbers are very well vetted, have been static for quite a while. I think in large part because of the recommendation last year that we had a full draft at the start of the budget process rather than building it as we go. So that's been a big help. And I will say that Teresa has been fantastic, Deb as well, in pulling all this stuff together. And the budget committee at the last meeting were basically ready to vote, and they, won't be voted formally until the 2nd of April on the final version, but they were happy with this as it sat, and which is great. And there will be a couple small changes, I think, but we'll be able to work through it and work it in. But this is a very complete draft. If you don't mind, I can run through a couple of things I want to point out really quickly, Bruce.
Please do.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
Are budget committee meetings limited by law to have to be in person, or can they already meet remotely?
That's part of my review. I think budget committee, planning board, and select board are all prohibited from having, I think actually any town board that has anything other than advisory vote has to be in person. And even the advisory ones, you want to have the public meeting component, which is why Bruce has mentioned the FOA being needed to be suspended temporarily. So I'm in the middle of figuring all that out. I think that most likely the solution is going to be to have a workstation here, and perhaps whoever is chairing the meeting or myself will have our video conference here with our chairs spaced out 6 to 8 feet apart as they are now, allowing people that want to attend, but maintaining that probably pretty severe distance. Yeah, that's kind of how I'm envisioning it right now, but that could change as well.
And some of that's just really gonna be dependent on tomorrow.
Absolutely.
I cannot imagine the state's not gonna get this flexibility in this.
Yeah, I've heard legislators talking about it, MMA is advocating for it. It's a very strongly pushed, necessary change.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
No, it's a good question. Most of these articles are, as you may have noticed, standard. The first article that I want to point out a change in actually is Article 7, where we have the administration line. This now includes two boards that were actually part of a separate warrant article for boards and commissions, of which the only similarity was the word board or commission in the title of their board or commission. It makes sense, and we've been working over the last few years to put like things together. So I have done that with this ordinance. Accordingly, Planning Board and Board of Appeals are now included in the administration department with assessing and code enforcement, which very much synonymous. The Board of Appeals appeals both code and planning board decisions. The code officer works very closely with the planning board and the appeals board. They're all related, so they're all together at this point. So that did save us one article because we really needed it at the end. Articles, let's see, Article 9 is the same. There was something here I wanted to point out. No, it was Article 10. Article 10 now includes the Conservation Commission budget. Conservation had been included with Planning Board and Board of Appeals. Again, that department was broken up. And so now we have conservation, town properties, heritage days, recreation, trails and beach, all fit together, I think, an appropriate configuration. One consideration that was raised by the budget committee on that change was, well, would adding those individual departments significantly alter the overall look or feel of those articles? Most of these, all three of them are very small, less than $10,000. The two smaller, I think, are less than 5. So very little impact, and I think a much more
Well, no real physical impact, just physical appearance impact.
just the appearance, yeah. And again, I think
They're
it
all
does.
pretty much level, aren't
They really are, and that's another good point to make, is that outside of the RSU budget, overall spending and revenues for the town result in a net that is about $15,000 to $20,000 different, higher than it was last year. So very, very reasonable.
And that's a factor of your decline in grand list. You're
Well-
playing catch up.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of, yeah,
Modest,
it's a 1/4% to look at the overall.
below the
budget.
rate of inflation increase in your budget,
Exactly.
with a decline in grand list.
That's really the sum of the budget. I do have a full draft of that budget at the after this warrant. I don't have anything else that's really worth mentioning until we get to the warrant articles some of which are included in this draft because they've been more or less vetted. A couple of them we'll be talking about later.
We're going to talk about the marijuana 41 through 48 under that.
Yes.
That's a separate item.
And has the planning board already had their public hearing, or is that coming up on the land use revision?
They already have, they had that, it was noticed, it was.
The red line is their changes.
The red line is the changes that we discussed at the hearing.
Okay.
That's
And
what
that-
will be printed.
That's the agriculture part of the marijuana.
Among several other changes.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
But the agricultural piece of the marijuana business was addressed there.
Primarily.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a few little.
There's a commingling.
Yes.
Commingling, yes, okay. But if people are looking for it, there's a piece of it there, and then the other 7 are here.
But the use of land and building structures
It's-
comes under the planning board. Okay?
Right.
The general overall intent, if you will, what's opt-in options
Is
occurs
under
in the other item.
Yeah. It's the most, yes.
By the way, I love how we ended up with one ordinance, but 7 questions or is it?
Lots of
questions.
Yeah,
I like how that's a little neater than I thought.
I am very proud of this and very proud of it.
Thanks. Thank
Yeah.
you. As I said, there's really not much else until we get to the articles. Article 38, unless we have any questions through the ordinances.
I'm good.
Article 38, the food sovereignty ordinance is included. We had that first reading. We decided that it looked pretty darn good. That's included with this draft as was presented at that first reading.
Did we just have one reading on that, or did we have 2?
We just had one. We had a public hearing, but then we actually had a formal
Oh,
reading.
yes.
But the changes were so minor and the language so simple and straightforward that.
I think we should take a vote on the food ordinance.
Tonight.
Tonight.
Yes.
Okay, great. Are we do it?
Let's do that now.
Want to do that now? It's listed in here, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
I would make a motion to approve the food sovereignty ordinance as included and indicated on the packet.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded to approve that second reading, so we can send it forth to the voters as presented in the packet. Is there any discussion on it? All the changes we recommended were made.
Yeah.
All in favor? Okay,
Thank you.
I'm taking care of that.
The land use ordinance, the version included with the select board packet tonight, there is one small change I want to point out in that, just so it can be noted as you decide to move that language forward formally into the town meeting warrant.
Okay.
And where is that?
That is, and I'll report it, it's the very last page of the red lines for the planning board. The land use ordinance changes, it would be under page
131 is the last page.
118, sorry, it's not quite the last page, page 118 is what we're looking at. The way it reads in your packet, the first.
They're not sequential. Well, they are sequential, but they skip numbers.
It's sketch, yeah. There's the header, and then there's 1 and 2. The header is recommended to be changed by the planning board, and it is just a switching around of words. I'll read the original, and then I'll read the proposed change. Agricultural intensive means retail, wholesale, or commercial agriculture uses or activities on a site which meets the following criteria, excluding seasonal farm stands that operate less than 180 days per 12-month period. That is recommended to be amended or changed to read, excluding seasonal farm stands that operate less than 180 days in 12-month period comma, retail, wholesale, or commercial agriculture uses/activities on a site which meets the following criteria. So they basically switched it around so that the excluding is at the beginning of the phrase as opposed to the end of it.
Okay.
So I have that, and I will include that in the actual warrant if the board approves of that change.
The line just below that should have a capital A for a low impact agricultural light industry. Now, right where your post-it note is in black,
Oh, yep,
the A, low impact should be capitalized.
capital L, yes.
Capital A.
For agriculture or? Oh, A, I see what you mean, yeah, because they had done,
Sorry, I'm not getting my plan.
all right, A, okay, great, yes.
Since it's sitting right there and we're doing
I will-
punctuation things.
I will correct that.
Thank you. But we don't need to make any vote on this, correct?
I'd like you to, because this would be a change from what was presented that would be in the warrant, so anything that goes in the warrant really ought to be,
I thought we always approved the entire warrant questions, and I usually did them in batches.
okay.
We do that after the meeting,
Yeah,
after the hearing.
Okay, so
So-
you've got to
so-
hold this to the final.
right. So what I've usually done is we'll take a batch of them, 1 through 8, or normal or something like
Okay,
that.
yep.
And that's what we've done in the past. And the planning board one, I mean, basically, we let them bring their language forward.
Yeah, so I'll just make that change and bring it forward, the final
Yeah.
version you vote on
Yeah.
the 30th.
Perfect.
I think we got on that.
Yes.
Were there questions on, so was there anything else you wanted to mention on the warrant articles?
No?
Okay, so let's get into the fiscal budget itself. Did members of the board have any questions? And, you know, I usually go and to the very last page in this, which is always the, what were the changes since the last time we read it? So you're looking at the March 10th to the March 13th updates. And I did argue with Eric a bit today about number 48. But, so that, I think you see where the budget is. It's not changed a great deal.
Did you want him to put the budget in as less for the school?
I sure did. But
Well, I think that was the superintendent's idea, but I don't really see how they're going to get it lower.
well, and that's what Eric believes as well. We'll have to see. They are a separate governance organization. We're the mailing house for them, if you will. I do think their intent is to be a fair amount lower than where they are now. Whether they can get to, as the superintendent says, 2%, who knows? He's really stepping up with that kind of language that I've not seen that with a superintendent in this district before. So it'll be very interesting to see how that works out. I'm hearing some good things from the board on that. So, I mean, I'm hoping maybe they'll end up at 3 or 3.5 or something like that. Who knows?
But
I do know their intent is to be much more bottom line oriented, and they really do take seriously that they do not want to create friction, if you will, about that
Between the
increase.
towns.
And I do know that if it is a 3% increase, our mill rate won't be over 20.
which will still be an increase because we're at 19.55 this year.
I know.
It would, and that's the question I wanted to, I'm looking at the rate calculation form, and we're tentatively talking about 20.36, but that's assuming a Board of Ed budget of over 5%. So this is a worst case mill rate.
It's not the worst case. Worst case would be where they are now, which is 5.7.
Yeah.
But it's pretty close.
Yeah.
So it should not be,
5.5, is that what you do?
I use 5.5.
Yeah.
Yes. If you look at the past 7 or 8 or 10 years, the average increase on the school budget has been 5 to 7%. I don't see this year being any different. If you follow the line guy, I'll follow the line. I haven't seen anything that would indicate to me that there's going to be anything significant changing, but I don't talk to people as much or as Bruce talks to the school board, I think, more than I do, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I would argue that it's also, in the last 8 or 9 years, they haven't put forward a bond of the size that they had needed to grapple, if you will, with this issue in the same way. So I think that forces them to be a little bit more serious about this. And not, I shouldn't even say a little bit more serious. They'll be more focused on it.
They have, right. They're just approaching it from a different viewpoint this year, it seems.
I thought it was a positive viewpoint.
Yes.
I mean, I usually go in there with a little bit more to say and a little bit more questioning. But I was pretty satisfied with where it was going in terms of discussion.
But next year, they're looking at a very similar increase, so if they can get this year's down, and next year they're gonna have things that come up that they can't change, the computer budget for the student laptops, and the bond will be another $100,000 more than this year.
Interest rate.
Yeah, they're stepping up.
Yep.
I think you know, if you take all of this and look at it, the mill rate for the town of Greenfield, okay, in 2020 is 3.55 of that entire mill rate. It will go to 3.60. So we're going up a nickel.
Which is really back to the level of 2016.
Exactly. Actually, it is lower. Yeah.
So 2016, 17,
Yeah.
it's lower.
Yes. So I think
Doing a
the
great
fiscal
job.
management we've done, when I say we, I don't mean us as a select board, because we do
E-town.
the town itself and the budget committee and all the boards and so forth has been very, very focused on keeping our part of this level. And the county's relatively level too, I would say.
Yeah.
And it helps that interest rates have been lower, so when we borrowed, we've gotten great rates. And we do a lot of good capital planning
Mhm.
so that we can continue keeping those great roads that some neighboring towns are very envious of.
Yes.
So we're providing a lot of service too for what we're doing here. I hope people are happy with that.
Sat right next to another selectman the other night, there at that meeting, that was
Yes.
talking about his roads.
Very local.
I would like to just sort of say something. I know we're sort of in the midst of something, but I feel that this is important for me to say. I would just like to say that my philosophy on the mill rate is that the mill rate is not indicative to me of anything else other than a formulaic number. To me, when you hear that mill rate, you immediately think of taxes, but with all due respect, and this is why I live in Reedfield, I think what you get is worth it. I think those schools with, if you don't, you can access those fields, you can access those facilities. They are as open to you and available. You just have to go through the schools. To me, if you base solely your assessment of fiscal responsibility on the mill rate, then what I think you're doing is losing sight of the entire economic picture of the town and how all of the pieces work together. So I just want to put that on there.
No, I appreciate that. I think that's a good reminder. There are some instances, believe it or not, where I try to act a little bit more as the conservative on this board because I want questions asked that aren't asked.
Good job, Bruce, good job.
And, I usually start those meetings when we meet with the school board that I'm one of their biggest fans and supporters.
Absolutely.
So.
I think it's important. I think it's important people know that what you did, I think is good.
And there are psychological numbers along the way. You cross a dollar number or something,
And it's not really the rate, it's the amount of money. You can have a different mill rate in a town, but if your valuation is radically higher or lower, it's a whole different amount of money, and it's the money we're looking at.
And if the state is changing, some of their formulas for,
You got a municipal aid,
not municipal
Revenue
aid,
sharing,
but, yeah, revenue sharing or homestead
Yeah.
exemptions and so forth. That makes a difference too.
Did I see that we really went down $41,000 in a projection of revenue sharing?
Yeah.
I think that was just a conservative estimate
Oh, yeah.
weighed against what the state is promising, so that you won't be unpleasantly surprised on the revenue side later on.
So we put in revenue sharing at 250, but it might be 291?
The revenue projections that came out in early March said that they were going to be giving us next year, if things went out the way they would like them to, $291,000. I thought, given the economic collapse we're looking at, that was an unreasonable number. So I want to hedge against that a little bit. I think the first half payment that does utilize funds that are in reserves now, by my understanding, that's probably going to be pretty healthy. But the second payment will likely be impacted by impacts to tourism, lodging, restaurant, all those things that people pay into that then get passed along to the state as revenue.
So it's not that it went down, it's that you're using a conservative number, even though the state is projecting the 290.
Yes, I wanted to put the 291 in there, but I didn't. Yeah.
All right, so that could affect us in
They
a
have to have
positive
the revenue.
way.
It's a shared revenue.
Yeah.
So
Right, and they don't
what
know
they're
it is.
taxing is, yeah, so they give us an estimate. And so what Eric is saying is, we're not gonna see as many cars on Route 1 as we thought we were gonna see.
And they make that adjustment in terms of the second half payment based on revenue.
Actual revenue.
So,
Yeah.
so we probably will get close to the full half in their tentative budget amount in the first half of the fiscal year, but second half, they've got to be doing well before they're gonna get it.
Yeah, and they may be conservative and hold back on a rosy payout the first half. I mean, I don't know what, anything's possible at this point.
I prefer the conservative approach, because then there will be no unpleasant surprise in terms of the town's revenue stream.
Good to hear that. I will point out that the reserve balances, that we always approach those conservatively. We are, even with a robust anticipation of school spending, we do have a healthy reserve, more than exceeding the minimum that we can establish in 2 months. If the school budget goes down, that looks even better for us. And I, as far as your point, Catherine, about the, or maybe it was Bruce, about the changes to the state affecting us, we did see that change to the homestead exemption, moving from $20,000 to $25,000. If you have a homestead exemption, much of the impact of this mill rate is going to be absorbed. Even with this fairly aggressive estimate for the school expenditures, someone with a $200,000 house would only have a $50 or $43 basically increase, given what is otherwise a
$44
overall. Yeah, it's 44 if you want to round up. If the school comes in closer to 3%, you basically would not see an increase in your tax bill. So I'm hoping and praying, and I really hope that the school can come through on it. I'm just a cynic sometimes, so there we are. I'll leave it at that.
I'd rather have our estimate on this side and be able to put it down.
Yeah.
Than to have to say, oh, wait, whoops.
We missed out.
Well, it'd be very interesting to see what their next round is. And again, I will say this, that they're actually facing some of the same, how they meet, how they go through the budget process.
Right.
In this particular COVID-19 situation as we are. So they're struggling to figure that out.
Everybody is, yeah. I think we're very fortunate to be where we are in the budget process.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine trying to move out a month and do what we've done in the last month in the middle of this.
Well, this, yeah.
So, yeah.
So I'm ready to just wrap up the budget discussion at this point. If people feel they've given the feedback and observations that they want, I don't think we need to take any action tonight, and we can move on.
Could I just say one additional thing?
Please do.
I'm looking at the warrants with the carry forward language in it. which is, I think you all know by now, causes me some degree of angst.
Mhm.
I support this budget. I think it's hugely responsible, best job possible, best use of resources, best use of undesignated funds. And I wholeheartedly support it. I just want to be on the record as saying that I really feel that a process that encumbers an entire budget line item before nickel one has been expended is an undesirable approach in terms of giving you an accurate reflection, line by line, department by department, of where you are at the end of the year.
Okay.
And I realize that I'm a voice in the wilderness, but it doesn't sit well with me, as you can tell.
I will say it's the shortest sort out at the end of the year, and it does.
It's gonna be hard to do.
It
It's a
does make work.
long-standing practice.
Yeah, it makes work for the auditors, makes work for us, but yeah.
I'm not so much worried about the auditors as I am a comfort zone
Yeah.
for administrative budget handling over the course of a fiscal year, so that you don't get trapped at the end of the year with a line overage that by statute you can't cover without going to a town meeting.
Well, I guess I'll say that hasn't happened. And probably the reason is that we have, and you know, your viewpoint is perfectly acceptable. I understand that. I just think the experience of the town rolling from year to year, there's just a general feel for how we spend and how things go. I know that doesn't sound like fiscally prudent, perhaps, but it does speak to fiscally on the spot oversight. You know, so we try to prevent those things from happening.
I think your end of the year audit, given the prudent management that I've seen since I've been here, would reflect a higher undesignated fund balance if you didn't automatically carry forward things, which in terms of budget planning and management might actually give you more flexibility over the long haul.
I think what we're gonna have to do is have Ralph write some of these warrant articles for us in an example way next year. So we see how that would work.
Maybe I don't care that much.
Okay, let's
I've done that. Where are we on?
we are at 88 door openers.
Back to Eric.
AKA
88.
door openers you hit with your elbow.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So I think that these have a dual value as we move forward, because this is a helpful thing to have if you're trying to avoid contact with surfaces. But jokes aside, Anna Carl has been a great help. I put her on this project once I realized I didn't have time to fully dedicate to it. She did a fantastic job contacting the vendors, getting quotes, meeting with them, discussing the scenario that we're looking at. I gave her direction, she ran with it, and I think came to a full circle with a wonderful memo detailing her review, including the quotes that we received, and making a strong recommendation. Although she's not looking at the lowest cost option, I believe that it's the lowest complete cost, and I think it's an appropriate and responsible recommendation, and so I would support her recommendation. We work with Overhead Door to install those ADA door openers to further our goal of full access.
Yes, I would ask why we're not going a little bit.
Because we don't believe that they are complete. Some of them didn't include strike plates, one of them did do a site visit. We had two that were very similar in the higher range, but we believe those two that are the most complete, and that we wouldn't have to pay extra for electricians to be on site, pay extra for components that were not included in the original quote, things like that.
Particularly the low bid.
You're not
basically
needed.
told us,
Yeah, I don't know.
but that's one of the things we want.
It is, and with the security system we have, it's really necessary. So that was just, we tried to explain to them what they needed. They didn't really, I would say they didn't care, but They just gave us a number,
Yeah.
and so
They
that's,
didn't really want the job.
So I would question whether you would be completely compliant with that bid.
I don't think we.
And then the whole point of this is to be ADA compliant. And so the other next
Right.
lower bid, we would have to have an electrician on site during the installation. And that's not really included, if you will, in
The price.
the pricing. So, both of those may come up somewhat, maybe not close to the 99, but they would somehow come closer in range.
Agreed, yeah.
But we're still gonna have to have the town's electrician come.
Yes.
It's just that they wouldn't have to coordinate being here at the same time.
Yes, for the installation. And then we've actually, started work, on the, outlets that are needed to be installed. So that is an independent piece for all of these.
Right, and so, but
So
coming.
each of these would be going up about the same amount, except if you have to have someone here, it is specific on the cost either.
Just to be there on the
Just,
site.
it's sort of to be almost, I wouldn't say consultant, but to be doing the work at the same time, which may not pace out in the same way. It's sort of like, you're giving a work order, and so it'll just be done as it should be done on the most time efficient basis, under overhead door, if you will. And the other one, you're kind of doing it as you go along, so that's not really as inefficient.
Yeah, and I,
Situation.
with the OMP, they also, again, didn't do a site visit. This was all just based on what are the parts cost, and what's the labor. So I don't, again, feel that that's accurate or complete as it could be or should be. I have a lot more confidence in the higher cost items, in part because they're close, and because they're complete. So,
Yeah, it looked to me like the two higher bidders used the same door opener. And the others had another brand with which I'm not familiar, not that I've done this in a while. But I've got a sneaky suspicion that the two higher bidders are using a higher end product for the door openers than the other two are.
Well, they're also noted on here being knowledgeable of ADA standards, so it sounds like conversantly,
It's a better conversation.
yeah.
yeah, which gives you, we want to make sure that when we're all done, we're
They
compliant.
were compliant.
Yeah.
So I'd like to make a motion to accept the bid in the packet for the overhead door company of Portland in the amount of $9,947.
I second that.
Okay, we have that motion on the floor for that bid, of overhead door company to do the work for the ADA compliance. So my one question would be, what is the time?
They called in a day and wanted to know if we were gonna meet, at least one of them, I think maybe a couple, called and asked, how soon could we get this started? So, I think very soon.
They say 3 to 4 weeks lead time
Okay, Good.
on the bid we are accepting, if we accept it.
sure. Further discussion on that motion? All in favor of the motion? Thank you.
Is that good, Dennis? I moved it along.
I liked it, thank you
Okay.
so
We'll
much.
move on to the marijuana establishments ordinance. So what we have in the packet is a master ordinance is how I'm going to refer to it in conversation, from which there are a number of parts. And each of those parts, if you will, then corresponds with a question that we put on the warrant. And so I'm going to defer to Dennis and Eric in terms of talking about this ordinance. Up front, a little quick introduction, if you will, and then we will go ahead and talk about it with specific questions if there are.
Now, this is why Grace came tonight.
Yes,
So
so
if
thank
we
you for
make
being.
it, she doesn't, yeah, she doesn't have any paperwork, so if you make it plain for her.
And I guess I'd just like to,
But I have it all here.
if we could, I can make a motion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes because we have something to consider after this needs 15 minutes. And I don't want you to feel rushed and interrupted in the middle, so.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Is
Yeah.
Been seconded to extend a meeting by 15 minutes. All in favor?
Only if needed.
I thought this was gonna be shorter.
Well,
We'll see.
we'll see.
So
Let's get into this.
in the packet, you have the ordinance, and then at the very back, which is supposed to be in front, is a bullet list that details what this ordinance is intended to do. I will read through that very quickly, just because I think that this is where we started with this, where we were headed. The direction from the board was to put together something that was simple, that tried to integrate with our land use revisions that are underway, and also was not overly restrictive, but was generally permissive, but there are a few things that are important to consider. First of all, is that we need to do this in a clean way, so the uses that were allowed will be allowed only if they're approved at town meeting. There is a very simple statement, section 4 of the ordinance, permitted establishments. And it says establishments that are permitted are only those that are voted on as to an option vote at town meeting. Very clear nexus there. And we have, as Bruce pointed out, 7 of those ready to go on the warrant. So I think that we have that cafeteria approach that was being requested. The single ordinance that includes all of those potentials, that's included. As I noted, the reference to the land use ordinance and its applicability, we did throughout this look to include reference to the land use ordinance. I did get a recommendation from Jack Comart of the planning board, who I shared this with because he was instrumental in drafting the marijuana regulations in the land use ordinance. That the planning board, I had kind of left them out as a separate entity, as really relying on the land use ordinance exclusively. However, his recommendation was that I bring them in as a review and approval authority, either in conjunction with or superseding the role of the code officer, which I think is appropriate. So this was drafted with the code officer being the primary gatekeeper before it gets to the select board for final approval. The change, as I understand it, that Jack suggested, and want to flesh this out some more, is that simply the planning board be put in as that gatekeeping authority, really just like any other, or many other permits that come through. The code officer is there in an administrative role, and the real heavy review and approval would come from the planning board prior to, at least I guess with the planning board right now, most things stop there, they don't go back to the select board. But given the nature of this and the way most towns are approaching it, that next level of review and approval would be the select board. So one change there, but that's how we're approaching it, and it does reference the land use ordinance many times to make sure that that awareness is there. And also we have a severability clause that says that if there's ordinance conflicts, that the more restrictive would apply. So if the planning board or the land use ordinance was more restrictive, that would apply. We're hoping that we don't have that happen, but it's a possibility, so that's been addressed. The really key pieces are why is this being broken up and treated differently? Those come down to limiting things like proximity to schools, churches, and playgrounds, ensuring that we have addressed odor and security as primary concerns, and establishing a license process that includes license fees. So there is a cost associated with this to the town. We're trying to recoup that in some way through a fee structure. This is very similar to many other municipalities. It might be a little bit on the higher end, but I'd rather start off with that and see what happens, because this is confirmatory territory for us about what the actual enforcement of this is going to take and what the administrative burden may be. And then the last point I want to make is that this really is intended, in my view, to at some point be included with the land use ordinance, as other ordinances that have been developed independently have been over time. We had a sewage ordinance that was included. We had a mass gathering ordinance that was included. We had a cell phone tower or wind tower ordinance that was included. this is another one of those kind of current event public policy issues. I think it's most appropriate to deal with it as an independent issue, see how it goes, and then bring it in to the land use ordinance as a formal component. There's actually a fair amount of duplication of things that the land use ordinance could have more easily addressed, but because of the nature of the issue, it was necessary to break it out. So that's my summary. The language in here does, I hope, just as I presented, but looking for comments, and I guess, Dennis, if you want to start with anything you had about this, if it meets your expectations or all that.
Yes, and I don't know the level of formality, but I just want to make sure, Grace, I just want to check in with Grace, you, just to say, make sure that you're following and everything's good. Because I can continue.
Sure.
Okay. And then we have questions.
You can just simply ask a question.
Yeah, Grace, I just want to make sure because it's important here. I really like this approach, and here's why. Each of those individual items leads to, well, if you want to do these, then this is what you vote for. So I like I love the way that Eric termed it, this sort of cafeteria approach, because the idea is the freedom and the choice should go to the folks who are voting. I think that this, the idea that this will eventually be a part of the land use ordinance has been very clear. And we have sort of made sure that we've bridged some of those gaps there. Again, you know, this isn't necessarily, you know, we're voting on how Reedfield can benefit from this or should not benefit from this. And to me, you get a chance to, if you want certain ones to go, if you don't, then you'll just vote yes on 41 through 48 and you'll be done. So that's how I look at it.
So what we want to make sure people understand is if you vote in 41 through 47, you need to also vote in 48.
Let me speak to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's kind of what I wanted to get into.
Yeah.
If you go back to the warrant articles, so yes, you have 41 through 47, which are the options, if you will, that are enacted. If you vote in 48, okay, that's really the master ordinance. You're saying, I'm passing this ordinance that then allows those previous 7 opt-ins.
If they
So
pass.
if they pass, okay? So 48 will stand, and you could end up passing 5 of the 7.
Mhm.
And then those 2 other questions could come back by petition or by whatever means a board in the future feels they should be asked again.
Yes.
So it is a true cafeteria approach. So you have the master document, okay, or ordinance that allows you to then, it's sort of like, here's the cash register before you go through the line of the cafeteria.
Yeah, and to me, if you look at it literally in that same order, the idea is that 48 will allow us to then be, you know, we're not caught sort of saying, okay, we voted in, now what do we do? So
It's the regulation and how
exactly.
to.
48, to me, if you want to colloquialistically, it's the kicker, right? You and that's the one.
So my question on all this is, should 48 actually be 41?
Yes, that's what I was.
Okay,
We're
yeah.
going there too.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah.
Is there a reason for that?
That's the blanket that enables the cafeteria selection incrementally as you choose. But without 41/48, the rest of it doesn't matter.
Well,
Yeah.
yes, I see what you mean. And can I take a stab at this?
Absolutely,
do.
go for it, yeah.
So
I can answer it very well.
no, you totally did it. You go first, because you're smart. And you did it. You're right. No.
Well, so.
And you explain, because I have.
The only, my gut feeling was that I didn't want people to think that by voting on that first one, they had to vote everything else. And that by voting on the first one, that it automatically approved everything.
Mm.
That was the only reason I put it last.
But that's a very good thought.
But it's so hard. I wish we could start an open town meeting and say, hey guys, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen that way. So, I think there has to be a lot of thought behind it. I can certainly see what you're suggesting. I think that might be a better way, but.
I don't know if it is a better way.
I think this
May
has
I
to
ask you a
do,
question?
no, I'm asking,
No, no, I
I'm
get it.
sure
I
what
get
they think.
Okay, that would be good.
Yeah, that's
Just as a
it's a great idea.
critical thinking kind of exercise, but I will say that 48 only, all the other items, whether it's first or last,
Mhm.
reference the fact that even if you pass all 7 of those, if 48 doesn't pass,
Right,
then
right.
nothing happens.
That's exactly
Because you
right.
have to have that.
Right, and it's mentioned in the
regulatory
thing.
authority.
Ralph?
So it almost doesn't matter.
So 48 would become 41 with an extra line that essentially says, this is your enabling driver, without which none of these are possible. Then you've made it abundantly clear
Yeah, yeah.
that the rest of them will have no standing whatsoever unless you bless the first one.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
But I think
And
that
some
falls
of it's
under
how
voting
it's-
instructions, and we can't do that.
Well,
Yes,
no, not
may I?
really, you're right. We can't tell people how to vote, but we can explain the mechanics of a
Yeah.
yes vote and a no vote in terms of how it relates to other questions.
In writing on the ballot?
No, not in writing on a ballot, no. we
That's
can't
what
do
I-
that.
Yeah,
And again, that, I mean,
I think what
you were probably 2 or 3 lines more than what we could possibly put in the warrant anyhow.
well, I mean, not necessarily.
Yeah.
We have some good ones that have to half a page on the bubble sheet. But I think that we could simply change the language to say something to the effect of all those individual 41 through 47 and say, this here's what you are looking into if 48 is approved.
Yeah,
Pursuant to acceptance
We
of
can flip it
48.
on its head and say,
Yeah.
48 or 41 says this ordinance, which shall include options if approved under Articles 42 through 48.
Yeah.
We can just flip it on its head. I think
Yeah, and
that's
I think what,
easily done.
I think what that does, if you will, is it allows people to reference back. Okay, yes, I've already voted yes, or I've already voted no on the master ordinance. So now I know how I want to be consistent or how I want to go through. the
Now I know whether I want fruit salad or the macaroni.
Exactly.
Because I want food, so then these are the flavors I want.
Or do I get Doritos?
I personally, I think the way the ordinance is crafted is elegant.
Yes.
I really, it gives maximum choice to people, and I think it's very consistent where we want to be with as a town. I just don't see issue with it in that direction.
Dennis, you've been waiting patiently. Can you weigh in,
No,
please?
I think you're right. It can't, the only thing I was going to speak to is as long as wherever 48, current 48 falls, we need to elicit a vote for the other parts. It's not just a 48 is it, and and that can also go both ways.
You don't
It
want
can go both ways because it can be, we definitely don't want this part, so vote against the ordinance. And to me, that creates, so when you have each of the smaller pieces, which get to what I believe to be the collective, instead of umbrella, it's more like a catch basin. Then if you want these, your eye is there first, and you don't immediately see, do you want to enact this, and be like, no. Because I want people, in my estimation, people seeing the choices that are there are as important as the language. And that is the only thing to funnel them to say, hey, oh wow, it's split out, I don't know if I want this, or I don't know if I want this, and that sort of thing. That would be my only thing. I absolutely agree. When I first saw this, I thought, oh, well, that should be up there and then underneath. But then I realized, you might be missing some people, or it might be confusing for some people that if they vote for that, well, I voted for the general one.
Why do I have to vote for any of these other things?
Exactly.
Right.
And that's my only offering. I am a flexible, normal human, and I believe in compromise.
Well, you're flexible anyway.
I am very flexible, but that would be my only thing, is that the whole point of separating them is so people will look at them.
Well, I see that's a pretty valid argument, because, I mean, that's why we have discussion, because we're trying to think out how we present something to be adopted or not adopted
Right.
in a way that makes the most sense for people when they enter the voting booth, logically to follow. And now you're changing my mind.
And if we feel more comfortable with some sort of, I don't know, but it's also here that if you read the whole language, shall the town vote to allow medical marijuana registered caregiver retail stores, in bold, subject to the provisions of the marijuana establishment ordinance to be considered under Article 48, if approved. Okay, then you can reference it. It says that right there. It's very clear. And perhaps if there is an addition in the essence of clarity, perhaps it should fall under that last catch basin where it says, shall an ordinance entitled Town of Greenfield Marijuana Establishments Ordinance be enacted as referenced in Articles 41 through 47.
I think
Maybe
that
all
needs
of
to be
those
there.
categories
Yeah, as reference.
need to have that as reference line that gets you to the bottom.
Yeah. And you have that, right?
Right,
So-
just
so-
so it's the opposite of what was in the others. Because they all say subject to 48, I think
Yeah.
48 needs to say
Reference
including
to.
Yeah.
41.
Or yes. in
Regarding
reference
whatever
to-
decisions are made, however the legal term is.
Yes.
So I
I'm no lawyer, but again,
It just seems like it's, if I was not in these discussions, and I
Yeah.
read those, and I just voted for
Yes.
those 7 things, I go down, really? Another thing?
Yeah.
It doesn't even say anything, because you were so explicit here?
Yeah.
So I
But
think it
without
needs.
48,
Right.
all the rest of it's moot.
Well, and one part of the challenge here is, and we always face this challenge on any ordinance that, we presenting, is we can't give ballot instructions that
Yeah.
try to steer voting.
Right.
But we do in hearings and so forth have an obligation to explain how things are enacted or denied on the ballot. So we're gonna need to do a good job of that in those 2 public hearings, the one where we get feedback, and then the one where you're just really looking at the actual warrant articles themselves.
But we'll need legal counsel to write that other line, because I don't know how you put that in so it's not an instruction.
It's not instruction.
Well, it's just a reference, I mean, and I borrowed just the language of the referential language from Cape Elizabeth or Brunswick. It was
Perfect.
someplace down south, so, I think it was Cape Elizabeth, but anyway, I'm sure our attorneys can clean it up and make it work for us.
I'm happy with the catch basin,
Yeah.
now that I've listened.
I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. I very much.
Okay.
You
That's
were-
right.
It was a good discussion, because that might be something that comes right from the floor anyhow.
It's just after all this hard work, I don't want it to go a glimmering, so to speak, because
Yeah.
people don't understand that the enabler is at the end of the process.
It
And
needs the.
no matter how carefully you structure the antecedents, it's,
But being right next to the secret ballot line, it ought to get a lot of attention from people. And it's next to last, so that's good.
And if you.
unless they're so fed up with all the numbers that they just go, oh.
Well, I
think if
also
it says
think
marijuana, they're
people-
gonna pay attention.
Yeah, and
Honestly.
it's bold, and I really like this, and I think it's.
I would appeal to the sense of the folks who crafted it and have the intensive development hours in the presentation. If that's their sentiment, and that's how they feel it should be, then that's fine.
I think if you reference 41 through 47, 48,
It should cover it.
they,
Brings it full
there's
circle.
gonna be some people that are just gonna go, no, 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 no. And,
Yeah.
Because it says marijuana, and there are gonna be others who just say yes because it says marijuana.
Yeah.
And then there are gonna be those who actually deliberate.
Yeah, and some who won't maybe vote on certain ones because they don't understand
We will get a
what it
lot of
means.
likes on this. We
Absolutely.
always, on the ordinances, we always get the highest number of
Likes.
votes, always on the ordinances. And this one, I think is gonna be closer than those, and there's gonna be more likes.
And you'll probably see people, for instance, say, no retail whatsoever. for
Yeah.
example.
We'll
And
see how
maybe
it
be
shakes
fine
out.
with agriculture and so forth. And if that's the sense of town, and that's what it is. And the thing is, if the national ordinance passes, and I'm not predicting that it will or won't, again, if 5 of the pieces pass, you know, they can be reconsidered in the future.
Yeah, sure.
By whatever means makes sense.
It would be really odd if it passed and none of the others did.
Right.
But anything
Well, no,
can happen
actually, no,
statistically.
actually, then that would be the town authority going forward
Mhm.
to consider opt-ins down the road.
Incrementally, you could make
You know,
choices.
I mean,
But
so
nothing immediate.
there would be no immediate thing, but we would actually have in place the regulations that we want for that. I mean, you know.
So that's an important point to get across.
Coordinate's very important.
Are there any, you know, I'm not gonna dwell on the 500 feet or the $1,500 or any of those. As I read through these, I think it has had sensible structure and review, and so I'm happy with that. I do think, you know, obviously, we want to make sure this is, the ordinance is widely available so people can read it through and ask questions on specific distances and things if they wish.
And one other question about the setbacks, are they similar to or the same as they are for other uses? Or is this a separate category that's a little bit more restrictive?
Good question. This is a separate category. I don't recall what we have or if we even permit adult use businesses.
Okay.
Or something, I mean, that's the closest thing I can think of.
So this is new.
But yeah, it is new. It's one reason why it's separate and not just plugged into the land use ordinance. I personally have a hard time with some of the setbacks from religious institutions and other things that seem kind of arbitrary. But then again, it's a common, 100-year history of these types of uses being pushed away. So, I probably my first choice to give a 500-foot setback from a church, but it's commonly done. I think it makes certain people feel better about it. I think with those limitations.
It's sort of in line with best practice. Right?
Yeah, it's just best practice, I guess. And the zoning really intentionally was left out so that if you have a manufacturing business that involves marijuana, it's treated the exact same as a manufacturing business for widgets, except for odor, security, setbacks from other buildings or from churches and schools and things. So the
So you
idea-
can't manufacture in a place where manufacturing is not allowed.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
So
it.
tried to put that parity in there. You made a good point, Bruce, about making sure it's widely available. I think we're gonna have to do probably a full mailing and full warrant to everybody this year.
Okay.
Especially with the virus.
It's more what's the reason. And maybe even the explanation document that we put together where we write, do red italicized text showing this is what we think the explanation is for this. I can't see much other choice at this point other than do it right now.
Let's plan on full household meal.
And people, my understanding, and I was surprised at this, but people could bring that document with them to vote.
Yes.
We cannot provide it to them the
They can
day
bring it.
of, but they can bring it the same way they could have it sitting with them at home when they're doing an absentee
Right.
ballot.
Can I act as a resource on that printing? I'm not talking about the content or anything, but I may be able to bring it down through a printer, either on newsprint or something that might be a little bit more cost effective for us.
So the excellent, yeah.
Yeah, so,
I think we need to take a vote on our first reading, and we're gonna have to extend the meeting again. So I would like to make a motion that we accept the first reading of I will get the title right for you, Dennis.
it's
Of
a
the
marijuana.
marijuana establishment ordinance as presented.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve a first reading of a draft of the marijuana establishments ordinance. And actually, we're not asking for any changes either, so as far as I know. Is there any discussion on that motion?
that we haven't had in the last half hour?
I know.
Grace, do you have anything?
No, I don't at this point.
Thank you. All in favor? Okay, we have 5 more minutes, so I'm not going to ask for that extension.
Okay.
We'll conduct a second reading of the revised administrative ordinance. In your packet, you will see the revised ordinance with, basically, this is, it's not really any major changes from the last one, are there?
The one that I did add at the suggestion of the auditor, and Ralph, I don't know if you like it or hate it, I'm not sure, we'll find out, is on the second page, an item to allow for the expenditure or to carry forward. The reason I'm suggesting that, as an addition to this, is that we have had auditors say it was voted on at town meeting, it went into the reserve, you can spend it whenever you like, however you like, as long as it's spent for the intended purpose. We have also had auditors, including our most recent, our current auditor, say, well, you really ought not to spend it because even though it was raised and appropriated one year, it is not necessarily anticipated to be
Unless
spent.
it's encumbered by a previous year's expense, you shouldn't spend it.
Yeah. So they got my answer. But the auditors, I've had 2 different opinions. My operating approach has been that if it's in reserve, it was voted on and it's in reserve for that purpose. It's just kind of held in suspension until we take it out.
Take some sort of budgetary action with the next warrant.
Well, that's the thing. You could take that approach of looking retroactively and authorizing, but it's always been my approach to spend the money if it's there for the intended purpose if it's needed. I'd like to clarify that in one way or the other, and my hope is that we can get the authorization to, if the compactor fails and we have the money, that we can use the money out of the reserve without having to go back to special town meeting, because it's not appropriation of new tax dollars, it's just the expense of stuff that's already in reserve. So I see it as a different class of expenditure and one that in some ways has already been authorized, but I'll stop talking on that.
I would just like to see it structured differently in terms of capital, non-recurrent contingent accounts, so that there are not a whole bunch of them out there. There are historic, specific areas where you incur these expenses on a more regular basis. You can anticipate them, and that's where you plug your reserves in.
All right,
So you need a motion on that?
Please.
I would make a motion to approve the Town of Reedfield Administrative Ordinance changes as noted. Chris has already seconded it.
No, it's the second reading.
Oh, sorry, approve the second reading of the Town of Reedfield Administration Ordinance.
Okay.
And now I'll second it.
So the second reading is the final reading, so then the language would become black and we would put that forward. So
Pending legal review.
Yes.
And then legal review is always. So is there any discussion? All in favor? So I have a question regarding the compactor information you put at the end was informational. We weren't going to do discussion on that tonight, were we?
I would like to have a vote for authorization to make the purchase, suspending the usual bidding process that we would go through for an item of this size. As I noted in the memo, we've worked with a single provider for the past 20 years, 25 years of the facility. I'd like to continue that.
Let's extend the meeting then. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting for another 10 minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. Continue making your case.
So we have an acute need. Atlantic has moved forward with starting the process. Fully understanding that it might be stopped tonight if I don't get approval to move forward with this. And really, I'm looking for a nod from the other communities as well.
How will you get that done?
That will be Thursday.
Thursday night is solid waste and recycling committee meeting.
Okay.
We're gonna have a special meeting for that, this purpose and another one.
My first conference call meeting.
They're fun, really.
I hope I can dial in correctly.
Not very real.
So, no, tell us, so what's the financial piece of this?
We are looking at about a $40,000, perhaps with a contingency, probably $45,000 expense. We have just that in the budget if we spend it next year. This year, at the end of the fiscal year, we're only going to have about $20,000 in the account, which puts us in an awkward spot. I did find out today, get confirmation from Androscoggin Bank that they will be willing to lease. I'm also looking at having reached out to Key Bank and Gorham Savings Bank to see if they can give us pricing on the lease. What I'm discussing with them is a 5-year lease, similar to what we do with the backhoe, with this, the difference being that the first payment wouldn't be due upon signing, it would be due a year out, which gives us a little bit more breathing room to build that account, that reserve account for the transfer station, so that we don't have to have an acute, basically, so we'd have $5,000 at the end of this year. If we defer that expense, we would have $20,000 at the end of this year. Feels safer to me. So, yeah.
So you're talking about leasing the whole amount and paying it off over time,
Yes,
not making any balloon payment.
yes.
Okay.
You know, what we're asking, because we have a specialized vendor, we're asking them to defer billing until start of the next fiscal year.
Not the vendor. The vendor's gonna get their money. We would be, at the lease, you always have the option of the leases to either pay
To when
the
the
first
year
payment
starts.
right when it starts, or to do it at a year out. And I'm recommending, I mean, with the backhoe, we did it right up front.
Right, but we were more.
We have a little bit more cash flush than, now.
Nice
right now-
carry forward.
Yeah, right. Thanks for carrying.
And this comes out of the capital account that the town sharing.
Yes.
Okay, so,
But we have to get permission from the other towns to make an expense out of cycle, right? Because you
Well,
want to lease it now.
It would be not necessarily out of cycle. They've already paid in, they're okay with our management, we already permission to manage that account. If we decided that we wanted to buy it out of pocket rather than leasing it, which was a potential outcome if leasing wasn't available, then we would have to get the other towns to buy into a special assessment, where they would have to probably throw in $5,000 or $7,000 each. We still would have had to quit paying an additional 10 or 12, and that would come up with the 40 to 45,000 we need to buy outright, without having, with only having 20,000 in reserve right now. So
how much is the lease payment?
lease payment would be probably 12,000, something in that range. I don't have numbers yet. The backhoe, which was 50 or 55, we were looking at. Actually, that was about 12,000, so it might only be 8 or 10. Over, yeah, I'd say 5 years, about $10,000.
But getting the lease would allow us to keep the 20,000 that's in the capital there
For a full year.
For a
and
full
build
year.
on it.
and build on it. And so it's basically, and otherwise, if we did it now, we would have to take it out of our contingency line, which then
Fully and
affects,
then some. Yeah.
which then affects our current budget, I think, because of our carry forward, right?
There'll be a lot of impacts this year's budget and next year's.
So I asked for us to see if we could lease it because I thought it was worthwhile, and it's gonna last 20 years, 15 to 20 years is its expected life.
15 years is what I'd say. We're doing a heavy duty model, but it's hard to say.
So if we're only leasing for 5 years with an expected life of 15, to me, that seems reasonable. And I don't think the other towns would object to paying a small financing fee as opposed to having to come up with money now.
Traditionally,
I
large
don't-
scale capital expenses like this
Should be.
are leased anyway unless you've been saving in a capital non-recurring line for some time for a specific purpose.
I think the lease is fine. What is the other, is the piece that we have junk?
It's not
Is that
junk,
for
but it's,
scrap?
we get scrap metal value out of it. It has some new parts, but I don't think there's much trading value.
Well, yeah, I wasn't even really asking about trading values.
Yeah.
Or
Get at least
not be,
$1,000
not
in
be,
scrap.
not be a junk, piece of junk on our
Probably
site.
$1,000 in scrap.
Okay,
That's about
okay.
right.
So what do you need from us?
Uh,
Authority to spend?
Yeah, in order to
Enter
initiate
into-
release, enter into the recycling equipment for that. suspending the usual policy for a bid process.
And contingent on agreement with our partners.
Yes.
Yes.
Thursday night.
At the solid waste.
And so, and is Catherine, you're our person there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, do they have to go back to their boards, or do they
Yes.
come with authority?
Well, they come with your town managers,
Mhm.
and they both have selectmen on the board, on the solid waste board, but they have to go back to get a vote, but don't think that would be an issue. And we'll find a way around it anyway.
Mhm.
And I don't mean around it, like circumvent it, but we would find a way to work it out if they had to.
So we need
wait
a
for
compactor.
votes.
Yeah.
Right, right, and they know that.
Yeah.
So I'll take a stab at a motion. So-
I have one more question.
Oh, no,
What if we didn't compact? Just more hauling?
A lot more
Yes.
hauling,
Okay, fine.
really not an option.
Okay, fine, it's fine. At least
three
I asked the
three
question.
times the.
Please go.
So I'd like to make a motion to authorize the town manager to enter into a lease agreement with Atlantic Recycling for a new compactor not to exceed $50,000. What was the word? Foregoing, suspending the purchasing policy for bidding on this one item. And seeking agreement from Fayette and Wayne on this purchase.
It's very complete.
Did I get
I
it?
will second that motion.
Yes.
I'll second the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Let's try not to spend $50,000, but I didn't want to say 45 and then it comes out to 45,100 and we can't
So
do it.
it's 40,000, like 40,300, something in that range, so it's right on the edge, but,
All in favor? I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Everybody stay healthy.
Yeah.
Okay.